We are planning to go to my new dacha for the May holidays. These words Lyudmila Sergeyevna pronounced with special relish, stressing the word my, as if hammering a nail into the lid of Katya's patience. In the spacious kitchen of their city apartment, the mother-in-law sat with her phone like a queen on a throne, methodically calling all the relatives, right down to second cousins whom Katya had seen only briefly at her wedding 5 years ago. Lush, with chestnut-dyed hair styled into a perfect hairstyle and a manicure the color of ripe cherries, Lyudmila Sergeyevna seemed the embodiment of that domineering woman often depicted in jokes about mothers-in-law. The tone of her voice revealed barely concealed triumph. No wonder, after all, her daughter-in-law Katya had inherited a dacha. And not just a shed with 600 square meters, but a solid house with a well-kept plot in a prestigious dacha settlement. Which meant that now it was family property, something to boast about to friends from the choir circle and a place where acquaintances could be invited for barbecues and gatherings with homemade wine. From the receiver came a cheerful voice that Lyudmila Sergeyevna deliberately made louder so that Katya would surely hear every word. Come for sure, my dears. There will be enough space for everyone. Can you imagine how much room? A full 1,500 square meters. Barbecues, nature, fresh air. Sergey has already bought a new grill, and I ordered a set of skewers with wooden handles. Very convenient. Zinaida Petrovna recommended them to me. A surprise is guaranteed for you. Yes, bring the children too, let them run around in nature. I have already picked a place for the swings. Every word struck the nerves like a small hammer. Katya sat in the corner of the kitchen, nervously stirring tea that had long gone cold and clenching her free hand into a fist so tightly that her nails dug painfully into her palms. A thin silver bracelet, a gift from her late mother, cut into her wrist. Fragile, with light brown hair gathered into a careless bun and tired eyes the color of an autumn sky, she seemed like a pale shadow beside her bright and noisy mother-in-law. Just a week earlier she had told her husband Sergey about the inheritance she had received. After long hesitation, having decided to share her joy, and now her mother-in-law was already managing her property as if she had every right to it. She wanted to interrupt this endless conversation, snatch the phone from the cold hands of her mother-in-law, scream that this was her, Katya's dacha, that no one had the right to decide where the swings would be or whom to invite for barbecues. But Katya restrained herself, only clenching her teeth so that the muscles on her cheekbones twitched. The plan had already matured in her head, taken root in the deepest layers of her consciousness, and to carry it out very little was required, just patience and self-control. Little Katya, choking with delight and impatience, ran along a narrow, barely noticeable path among grass as tall as a human being. The spicy smell of meadow flowers and sun-warmed earth wrapped around her like an invisible cocoon. A faded white sundress with embroidered daisies, passed down from her older cousin, fluttered in the warm summer wind like wings. And in her tan childish hands she carefully held, as if it were the greatest treasure, a glass mayonnaise jar with a nylon lid, in which tiny greenish lights of freshly caught fireflies faintly shimmered. Dad, look quickly what I have," she shouted in a ringing child's voice, jumping over a fallen log and running up to the crooked wooden porch of an old summer house painted a delicate blue color, the same shade as the cornflowers growing along the fence. Alexander Petrovich. A tall man with kind brown eyes and a neat little beard in which the first gray hairs were already showing tore himself away from a worn book in a dark blue cover and looked at his daughter with a gentle smile. His eyes behind the lenses of old-fashioned glasses in a thin metal frame glowed with genuine pride and endless fatherly love. The wrinkles at the corners of his eyes folded into little rays. "Mom always said that Dad had laughing eyes. My little explorer." He set the book aside on the faded tablecloth and carefully took the outstretched jar, examining the dancing lights inside. Ink stains were visible on his hands, traces of long work on scientific articles. "You know, Katyusha, these fireflies, they are like little lanterns of hope in this complicated world. Imagine, they shine even on the darkest and coldest nights, reminding us that light will always find a way through any darkness." The dacha in the Romashka settlement was their special place. Every summer Katya's family spent time here, far from the city bustle. Her father, a professor of biology, taught her to distinguish plants and insects. Her mother, an artist, painted watercolors while sitting by the pond not far from the plot. That year Katya turned 12. She already helped her mother preserve vegetables from the garden and could light the stove in the house by herself. Her parents were delighted by how independent their daughter had grown. "Someday this dacha will be yours, Katyusha," her father often said. "Take care of it. Every tree here was planted with love." No one could have imagined then that this summer would be the last one they would spend together. In the autumn, Katya's parents died in a car accident while returning from the opening of her mother's exhibition. The girl was taken in by her aunt, her father's sister, who lived in another city. The dacha was left abandoned. The aunt did not like nature and considered trips out of town a waste of time. Katerina grew up, graduated from university, and began working as an architect. At one of the corporate parties she met Sergei, a pleasant young man from the finance department. Their romance developed rapidly, and soon they got married. From the first days of their life together, Lyudmila Sergeyevna, Sergei's mother, actively interfered in the affairs of the young family. She criticized Katya's cooking skills, her style of clothing, even the way Katya arranged the furniture in their apartment. The mother-in-law constantly reminded them that the apartment where the young family lived had been bought with her help, and therefore she had the right to a say in all family matters. Sergei, a dark-haired man of average height with regular facial features that nevertheless did not make him truly attractive because of a constant expression of uncertainty, never stood up for his wife. In moments of conflict he seemed to physically shrink, pulling his head into his shoulders and trying to disappear, to dissolve into space. "Mom wishes us only good, Katyush, she is just worried about us, that's normal," he would say in a soft, almost ingratiating tone when Katya, holding back tears of resentment, tried for the 100th time to discuss with him the unbearable behavior of his mother. Then his brown eyes, like his mother's, became plaintive, and perspiration appeared on his forehead, as if he were physically suffering from the need to choose between his wife and his mother. Over time Katerina, waking up in the mornings next to her husband and looking at his relaxed sleeping face, began to understand the bitter truth. She had married not a strong independent man, as she had once thought in the heat. In love, but a classic mama's boy, an adult child in the body of a 32-year-old man, incapable of making his own decisions and taking responsibility for them. A financial analyst, skillfully juggling multi-million deals at work, at home he turned into a weak-willed puppet in the skillful hands of his mother. Their relationship gradually cooled, like tea forgotten on the table, in which the former amber glow and aroma could no longer be seen. The passion of the first months of marriage was replaced by habit, then by polite indifference. Sergei stayed late at work more and more often, explaining it with important projects, although at times he clearly smelled of women's perfume, light and floral, completely unlike the sharp woody scent that Katya preferred. She did not make scenes, only silently moved to the edge of the bed when he came home after midnight. In response, Katya immersed herself in professional projects, spending hours over drawings and sketches, winning one architectural competition after another. It was as if they lived parallel lives in different dimensions, accidentally crossing only at rare shared dinners and on weekends, which most often took place at Lyudmila Sergeyevna's, who loved to gather family get-togethers with obligatory conversations about how there was a lack of children's laughter in their home. 3 months ago Katerina received a letter from a notary. The aunt, who had died after a long illness, left her an inheritance that very dacha in the Romashka settlement. As it turned out, all these years the aunt had regularly paid taxes for the plot, even though she did not visit it. Katya immediately went to see the place of her happy childhood. The dacha required repairs. The roof was leaking, the paint on the walls had peeled, and the garden was overgrown with weeds. But even in such a state this place evoked warm feelings in her. Every corner here held memories of her parents. The next 2 months Katerina spent at the dacha, doing repairs. She told neither her husband nor, especially, her mother-in-law about it. She arranged vacation time at work and every morning supposedly went to the office, but in fact to the dacha. With her own hands she repaired the roof, refreshed the walls with new paint, cleared the garden and planted flowers exactly like those she had once planted together with her mother. All this time Katya reflected on her marriage, on how unhappy she had become. The dacha became for her not just property, but a symbol of freedom and independence, an opportunity to start a new life. When the main work was finished, she decided to tell Sergei about the inheritance. His reaction was predictable. First surprise, then a proposal to sell the dacha and buy something closer to the city. And then he said the phrase that finally convinced Katya of the correctness of her decision. We definitely need to show the dacha to Mom. She has dreamed so much of a country house. Already the next day the mother-in-law arrived with a visit. She inspected the dacha from attic to basement, making notes in a notebook and aloud planning what and where needed to be redone. Here we will cut down this old apple tree, here we will put a new gazebo. And these garden beds are not needed at all, they only take up space. Every word of hers was like a knife strike to Katerina's heart. We must celebrate the May holidays at the dacha. We will invite all the relatives. Let everyone see our new family nest, Ludmila Sergeyevna announced, already mentally appropriating for herself the right to dispose of someone else's property. Katya wanted to object, but suddenly realized that this was an excellent opportunity for her plan. She smiled and agreed, of course, let's celebrate. I'll organize everything. On the 1st of May, on a day when nature was especially generous in displaying its spring beauty, the apple trees were covered with delicate pink lace of blossoms, the lilac was so fragrant that it made one dizzy, and young grass with lush emerald shoots carpeted every free patch of ground. Guests began to gather at the wrought iron gates of the dacha in the Saromashka settlement. One after another cars arrived, from which well-dressed relatives with children, bags, and baskets unloaded. First, of course, arrived Ludmila Sergeyevna by taxi with 2 huge checkered bags stuffed with food, as if she intended to feed an entire army rather than 24 people. She wore a light beige trouser suit, obviously new, and a silk scarf with a floral pattern tied around her neck with deliberate carelessness. Next arrived Sergei's brothers, Andrei with his wife Irina and 2 noisy 8-year-old twin boys. And Dmitri, a silent bachelor, brought along a new companion, a striking blonde introduced simply as Lena. Gradually more distant relatives arrived as well, aunts and uncle, cousins, many of whom Katya had seen only fleetingly at her wedding 5 years ago or at her father-in-law's funeral last year. They politely hugged her, called her dear Katenka, and immediately shifted all their attention to Ludmila Sergeyevna, as if she were the true hostess of the celebration. Ludmila Sergeyevna, as always, instantly took charge, like a general leading a military operation. With commanding notes in her voice she assigned who would sleep where. Andrei with his family in the large room upstairs. Dima with Lenachka in the guest house. And Vera with Uncle Kolya in the second bedroom. Who will take care of the grill? Seryoza, you control the fire. Dima, you're responsible for the meat. I've already marinated it, everything is ready. Who will set the table? Iraka, you and Aunt Vera take care of the salads. I brought all the ingredients. Lenachka, be so kind. Lay out the disposable dishes. They're in the blue bag. Her ringing voice carried across the entire plot, drowning out even the music that someone among the guests had turned on. With the air of a hereditary aristocrat conducting a tour of a family estate, she led the guests around the well-kept grounds, showing where a new bathhouse was planned to be built. Right here, on the site of this old shed, Seryoza has already made arrangements with a crew. They'll come in June. And where should we lay out a tennis court? Seryoza played quite well in his youth, it's time to resume. And it will give the children a place to frolic. She kept saying, we decided, we thought, we are planning. As if the dacha were the collective property of their family, and not Katya's personal inheritance. Katya, dressed in a simple linen dress the color of young foliage and a straw hat with wide brims, quietly watched what was happening like a spectator in a theater, standing in the shade of an old apple tree. She did not contradict her mother-in-law, did not interfere with her, allowing her to fully enjoy the role of hostess and manager of the celebration. Only occasionally did she exchange glances with her husband, who awkwardly smiled at her from afar, clearly not understanding why his wife was so strangely detached on this festive day. Inside Katya, beneath the mask of calm and light detachment, tension was building, as if a bowstring were being drawn to its limit. The moment of truth was inexorably approaching with every minute. By lunchtime the table was set, the shashliks were smoking on the grill, salads and appetizers filled the wooden tables in the garden. Ludmila Sergeyevna poured everyone a glass of champagne and raised hers. To our new family dacha, excuse me for interrupting, Katya said calmly, rising from her seat. Her voice sounded firm and confident. Before we start celebrating, I want to clarify something. She took an envelope from her pocket and carefully removed several documents. This is my aunt's will, under which I inherited this dacha. And this is the certificate of ownership in my name. And the final document is a divorce petition, which I filed yesterday. A deafening silence hung over the garden. All eyes were fixed on Katerina. Sergei, I am grateful to you for the years we spent together. But our marriage has long since turned into a formality. We both know it. You will receive a copy of the petition by mail. She turned to her mother-in-law, whose face was distorted by a grimace of shock and indignation. Lyudmila Sergeyevna, this dacha belongs to me and only to me. It never was and never will be part of your family property. My parents grew up here. I spent the happiest days of my childhood here. I will not allow the apple trees planted by my father to be cut down, or the garden beds where my mother grew strawberries to be destroyed. This is outrageous. The mother-in-law finally found her voice. Sergei, say something. She can't do this. Sergei helplessly shifted his gaze from his mother to his wife. Always decisive in financial matters, now he looked absolutely powerless. I've already said everything, Katya continued. And now I ask everyone to leave my property. The celebration is over. You'll regret this, Lyudmila Sergeyevna hissed, grabbing her bag. We'll go to court. We'll prove that this dacha is jointly acquired property. That is unlikely to work, Katya replied calmly. An inheritance received during marriage by one spouse is not joint property. Article 36 of the Family Code. You can check. One by one the relatives left the dacha. Some threw condemning looks at Katya, others looked more bewildered. Sergei tried to speak to her, but she only shook her head. Not now, please, just leave. When the last car disappeared around the bend, Katerina sank onto the bench under the old apple tree. The excitement had not yet left her, but along with it came a feeling of freedom. She surveyed the garden she had saved from destruction, the house she had repaired with her own hands, and for the first time in a long while felt that she was returning to her true self. In the evening, when the sun, like a heavy orange sphere, began to slowly sink toward the horizon line, painting the sky in incredible shades of purple and gold, Katya stepped out of the house, quietly closing the creaking door behind her. In her hands, she carefully held that very glass mayonnaise jar she had found in the attic among old things. Incredibly, it had survived after 20 years, as if waiting for this very moment. Katya set off in search of fireflies, stepping on the soft grass. Katya walked barefoot, just like she did in childhood when the world seemed vast and full of wonders. The warm evening air was filled with the scents of lilacs, apple blossoms, and damp earth. After a recent short rain, crickets chirped monotonously somewhere in the distance, and a nightingale sang in the raspberry bushes. It was as if nature was giving a special concert just for her. Gradually, twilight deepened, turning the familiar outlines of trees and bushes into mysterious silhouettes. And then, in the semi-darkness, they began to appear. Tiny flying lanterns, flickering with a mysterious greenish light. Katya carefully, with childlike delight, caught the fireflies, gently placing them in the jar. Each captured firefly was like a little miracle, a reminder of carefree childhood, of her parents, of a time when there were no broken hopes, betrayals, or pain. After catching about a dozen glowing insects, she secured the lid with small holes for air and quietly walked to the pond. On a small hill by the pond, where her mother once liked to sit with her sketchbook, Katya sat down on the grass. High in the sky, the first stars had already lit up, bright, clear, and infinitely distant. She sat, hugging her knees with her arms, thoughtfully watching the tiny lights of the fireflies dance inside the jar, creating whimsical patterns of light and shadow, reflecting on the dark water and in her eyes full of unshed tears. You were right, Dad, she whispered, looking at the starry sky, as if her father could hear her from that distant constellation where the souls of loving parents fly. Fireflies truly are little lanterns of hope, shining even in the darkest nights. Today I finally understood what you tried to tell me back then, that even when it seems the whole world has plunged into darkness, there is always a little light to show the way. The jar with fireflies stood beside her on the grass, illuminating her face with a soft, otherworldly greenish glow, wrapping her in a cocoon of peace and serenity. A tear rolled down her cheek, but Katia quickly brushed it away with the back of her hand. On her lips played a light but confident smile, not sad, but full of hope and anticipation. Ahead lay a completely new life, free from a toxic mother-in-law with her endless demands and attempts at control, from a weak husband who never became a true partner and protector, free from constant compromises and concessions slowly destroying her soul and identity. A life in which she would decide her own destiny, choose her own path, and take responsibility for her decisions. A gentle breeze ran through the grass, carrying the scent of blossoming apple trees, planted by her father many years ago. Katia deeply inhaled this aroma, filling her lungs and soul. Tomorrow she would release the fireflies, and then begin planning the reconstruction of the house. Her professional skills would finally serve not strangers, but herself. She would create a true sanctuary here, a place of strength to retreat to any time of the year, to be alone with her thoughts. And the dacha, a small inheritance turned invaluable, became not just property, not just a building of timber and boards, but a true symbol of freedom and a new beginning, a starting point for a different life, a place where memories of a happy past gave the strength to move into the unknown yet promising future, a place where little fireflies would always show the way even in the darkest night. Dear viewers, I wish you health. If you watched this video to the end and found the story interesting, subscribe to the channel and like the video. This helps the channel greatly. New videos are released every day.
Yeah.